Hello, welcome to the second episode of the AFL Rivalry series. Lachlan 2612 Sports Channel here, and we are going to be talking about Melbourne versus Collingwood. The traditional Queen's birthday clash. Melbourne and Collingwood. They've played each other in many grand finals. Melbourne's 6 premierships have come against Collingwood. Their rivalry basically was at its peak in the 50s, when Melbourne and Collingwood played each other in so many grand finals at that time. Melbourne won in 1955 and 1956 against Collingwood, before the Magpies got their revenge in 1958, ending Melbourne's quest to make it four straight premierships and breaking Collingwood's and tying with Collingwood from 1927 to 1930. Before the Demons got their own back in 1960 by holding the Magpies to just 2 goals. And then Melbourne won by 4 points against Collingwood in 1964. Before Melbourne had 57 years without a premiership before winning one in 2021. As for Collingwood, they won 2 more. They played in a few more grand finals after that. One of which was a win in 1990 against Essendon, and the other was 2010 when they beat St Kilda. Melbourne and Collingwood, they usually play each other on Queen's birthday. The first of a traditional Queen's birthday clash came in 2001, where Collingwood won by 77 points. Which is the perfect revenge for 1 year earlier, when Melbourne beat them by the same margin in 2000, with Anthony Rocker being best on ground. Then Collingwood won the next 2, with Chris Tarrant and Paul Akiria being best on ground. Although Josh Fraser got best on ground in the Queen's birthday clash in 2004, but it was the Demons who won by 9 points. Before 45 and 47 point wins for Melbourne happened in 05 and 06, with Cameron Bruce and Travis Johnston being best on ground. 2007, the Demons got their second win of the season against Collingwood, with Russell Robertson getting BOG. Before 7 out of the next 8 Queen's birthday clashes all went to Collingwood. Usually, every time Collingwood players would get best on ground in those wins, except for that draw in 2010 when Aaron Davey got best on ground for Melbourne, and Bernie Vitz got best on ground in 2014. When Melbourne lost that game by 33 points. 2016. However, in 2015 was would be the first game of the Neil Danaher Trophy, after Neil Danaher sadly had MND. That was how the Big Freeze was born. The Neil Danaher medalist in 2015 on Queen's birthday was Travis Cloke, when the Pies won by 25 points. The next year it went to Max Gawn, although the D's won by 46 points. The next year was Melbourne by 4 points, with Christian Petrarca getting best on ground. And this was 4 years before he became a superstar before becoming one of the superstars in the AFL. 2018, that went to Collingwood. That was played in front of 83,000. Best on ground was Mason Cox. 2019, Pies do it again by 41 points. Adam Treloar got BOG. However, there was no Queen's birthday clash in 2020, as that had to get moved to August 15 in Queensland, following the worsening coronavirus pandemic. Suppose if the AFL had restarted 1 week earlier, most teams would have played each other on June 8, 2020. but they couldn't do it because of COVID. 1 year later, it was only played in front of 16,000 at the SCG, and that was Nathan Buckley's last game as Collingwood coach. Even though the Pies won by 17 points and Pendlebury got best on ground. Really the second time in the clashes. And he did that in 2009. Anyways, let's also go to the player swaps. Melbourne and Collingwood have done a few player swaps. And the two teams are nearly merged in World War II. After a lot of players came unavailable due to them being conscripted into the army at that time to fight in the world wars against the Axis, from which was Mussolini's Italy, the Nazi Germany, who were then led by, well, some guy who should not be mentioned, and the Japanese. The one that sadly upset my family. That Japanese army sadly has upset my family for so many years. After what happened to my grandfather. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get back to the Melbourne Collingwood thing. However, Melbourne and Collingwood have done a player swap in the mid-2010s. Harry O'Brien and Ben Kennedy have gone from Collingwood to Melbourne halfway through last decade, while Jeremy Howe went the other way from Melbourne to Collingwood. Even though Jeremy Howe was a pretty good forward at Melbourne, but at Collingwood, he was an even better half-back. However, for the Abbotts, there's the Abbott siblings. Les Abbott and his younger brother Clary grew up in Collingwood and had ambitions to play for Collingwood. Les played one game in 1904, while Clary played twice in 1907. Ironically, they would both play for Melbourne. Les played for Carlton in 1905. He played for Richmond in 1910 and 11, and played three more games at South Melbourne, after playing 3 for Melbourne and 1 for Collingwood. Clary, he played for Collingwood in 1907 before going to Melbourne in 1912. They played 42 games together. And then there is Percy Wilson. Percy, he was one of Collingwood's best players in the 1910s. He played in 2 flags in 1910 and 1917, but missed the 1919 premiership due to a broken arm, before he moved to Melbourne in 1921 to become captain coach. He got a standing ovation from Magpies fans in his first game since he left in 1921. Bill Libis. He was one of Collingwood's best rovers in the late 20s and early 30s, between 1927 and 1930. However, his run ended in 1931, when he had a lengthy suspension, before quitting Collingwood in 1933 due to the worsening economic crisis, which is also known as the Great Depression. He was never afraid to stand up for himself in the 30s. Then after that he went to Melbourne. But he was not part of their 3 straight premierships in 1939 to 1941. And then there was the 1979 switcheroo. Ross Brewer would leave Melbourne and go to Collingwood in return for Wayne Gordon, John Delamata and Phil Carman going the other way to Melbourne. Fabulous Phil only played 4 years at Collingwood and then one at Melbourne, before quitting to go to Essendon in 1980. John Delamata, he's only played he played 17 times at Collingwood and just 2 times at Melbourne. And then there's Wayne Gordon, played in the wing for Collingwood's 1977 grand final, and tragically in 1983 he died of cancer after he played 34 games for Melbourne. As for Ross Brewer, however, he played 121 times for Melbourne between 1972 and 1978. Before, he played 47 memorable games in black and white, including the goal in the dying minutes of the 1981 first semi-final to stop Fitzroy from getting into the prelim against Geelong, which ultimately led to Collingwood getting revenge on the Cats from the 1981 qualified final. And then, by the time the 1982 season divided, Collingwood were unfortunately divided. By the time a new Magpies board was founded and got Tommy Hafey sacked. And he was a Brownlow medalist in 1979. After his disastrous season in 82 at Collingwood. However, he left for Melbourne in 1983. And just to think, they played each other in the opening round that year, which Collingwood won by a kick. And that was John Cale's first game as Collingwood coach. And Collingwood fans had booed Peter Moore in his first game since leaving the Magpies to join Melbourne, which seems to be pretty harsh and unfair. He, however, won a second Brownlow in 1984. He kept himself away from Collingwood until Josh Fraser got drafted and became his mentor. And then he was forgiven by Collingwood fans at the end after he served his time at Collingwood. And plus, that was also after his son Darcy got drafted to Collingwood in 2014. And Darcy Moore made a promise that he would never go to Melbourne. And then, well, Melbourne fans saw their own version of the Peter Moore controversy in 2002. When Shane, 2 years after Woewona won the Charles Brownlow medal, he left the club to go to Collingwood. And yet he was booed big time by Melbourne fans in 2003 when they played each other on Queen's birthday. Woewona, he spent 3 years in black and white after spending 6 in red and blue. He was hated by Melbourne fans in 03 and also in 04. When he left Melbourne for Collingwood, and also in 05 he was still hated. Before he was forgiven by the time Collingwood gave up on him in 05. He still managed to get a cavalcade on Queen's birthday 2006. However, he was cheered. He was, however, cheered by Melbourne fans once again. The highest score in a Queen's birthday game was 141, which happened to Melbourne in 2006. And they also had the lowest score in 28 in 2014. The biggest winning margin was Collingwood. and that was by 88 points in 2011. Collingwood had won 5 consecutive Queen's Birthday games and also won 11 in total. Mark Neild, he was in the coach's box for both teams. He went to he was at Collingwood as an assistant coach and then became Melbourne's head coach for a couple of years before being sacked after his coaching was a disaster. 7 goals was the most kicked by a player on a Queen's Birthday game for a Collingwood player in Chris Tarrant in 2002 and Travis Cloke in 2015. Even though they say Russell Robertson's 7 was counted, but Melbourne's most goals kicked by a player in that clash was 9 goals from Jeff Farmer in 2000 when the Demons won that match. And he came off for Ben Beams in the second half and turned the game Melbourne's way. It looked like Collingwood were going to win an upset until Farmer came on. Mark McGough was the youngest player to play on Queen's Birthday. He was 17 years old in 2002. And he was just a couple of days away from turning 18. The oldest was Nathan Buckley. He was 33 when he played in that game in 2006. He was close to his 34th birthday. The highest crowd was 83,518 in 2018. The lowest crowd was 16,453 at the SCG last year. Anyways, that would just about wrap up episode 2 of the Rivalry.